Disney is one of the largest and most prominent brands in the world today. Between the movies, TV shows, parks, resorts, record label, and merchandise, I'm willing to bet that most of you interact with something Disney on a regular basis. If you're like me, you probably didn't feel like this was always the case, but over the past decade and a half, I feel like Disney has been creeping into more parts of my life. Disney is at an all-time high, and at the center of this phenomenon is one man. Bob Iger is an accomplished businessman, author, and leader who brought about significant growth to the Walt Disney Company through strategic partnerships and eventual acquisitions of the largest brands in the movie industry. I would say Bob Iger is probably the most recognizable and known former CEO of Disney outside Roy O. Disney himself, and certainly one of the most known business leaders today. For decades, he has been in entertainment and was able to spearhead some of the largest acquisitions in the industry with the likes of Pixar, Marvel, Lucasfilm, and Fox. On top of this, under his leadership, Disney was able to create the fastest growing streaming service that could compete with the likes of Netflix and Amazon in Disney+. Bob Iger has had a significant impact on the legacy of the Walt Disney Company and transformed it forever. I'm going to show you why Bob Iger is one of the most incredible business leaders today and how he changed Disney for the better. Michael Eisner had been in the CEO position since 1984 and was seen as a legendary figure for Disney as he had brought about the Disney Renaissance with a little help from his friends. He effectively brought Disney back from extinction through his leadership, and when reflecting on this time at Disney, these are considered the Eisner good years. Unfortunately, the good years need to be followed by the bad, which is exactly what happened for Eisner. His performance in the latter years is best summed up by this quote from one of the largest shareholders in the company at that time, Roy O. Disney, Walt Disney's nephew, who had criticized Eisner, saying he had mismanaged many parts of the company, including animation, TV, and theme parks, as well as turned the Walt Disney Company into a rapacious, soulless conglomerate. Bob Iger took over the CEO position in 2005 after Eisner was pushed out of the company by executives who didn't like his management style and thought it was hurting the performance and longevity of the business. Iger had to start making moves to appease the stakeholders who had put him in the position by making a swift and definitive decision that showed he was interested in moving away from Eisner's leadership style in a different direction. Iger's first act as CEO was to disband Eisner's favorite department, the Strategic Planning Division, due to it being unpopular with Disney's executive who thought it was overbearing in the decision-making process for different aspects of the company. This marked a significant transition from the Eisner era, where he was a part of all the decisions of every part of the business, into Iger's unique approach to running the company that followed his own leadership style of decentralizing Disney by letting each business create their own strategy and staying informed at different parts of the decision-making process, but never interjecting where he felt he wasn't needed. Now we should look at some of the reasons Bob Iger was such a successful leader and what leadership strategies he imposed to get the Walt Disney Company to work as a beautiful orchestra rather than a late-night karaoke bar. The first reason Bob Iger was an incredible leader was his personal touch and emotional intelligence. Having a personal touch when conducting business is the easiest way to show that you care about your business partner and the arrangement you are making. Iger has said he makes it a point to ensure that the people he's interacting with feel like they're the most important person in the world, which makes them feel empowered and motivated. This heavily plays into his high level of emotional intelligence and his advice to be present to the people who work for you and show them that you have a vested interest in them. Find out who they are and bring an attitude of empathy with you when you engage in criticism. This gives him a strong yet soft demeanor when working with employees and business partners, making him easy to approach but intimidating enough to want to please. The second reason for Bob Iger's success as a CEO has to do with developing a team around himself that he could take feedback from. Larger companies with as many different moving parts as Disney require a large team to meet the goals of the business and the CEO. Iger's innermost team consisted of 10 people that he would meet with multiple times a week, with the goal of at least one of those meetings being face-to-face. He built an effective team that he could seek feedback from. He knew that other people's expertise was much needed to successfully run the whole of Disney. He demonstrated those ideas by saying, "As much as you're the captain of your own ship, a major part of your business is allowing those around you to own the vision." Requesting feedback both emboldens the people who work for you and also brings invaluable insight. You need that boots-on-the-ground perspective to keep your vision calibrated. Sit down with your team members and direct reports over lunch to seek feedback and advice. Not only does this build trust, but it increases your own self-awareness in considering another person's point of view in pursuit of common goals. Knowing he could always turn to his team for counsel over numerous issues that faced the company allowed him to approach problems with more confidence, as he was sure he was making the most educated decision. The third reason Bob Iger was so successful in his position has to do with the clear expectations he set for the company. If Bob Iger had a project he wanted to be done, you'd certainly get extremely concise and clear directions about what his expectations of the finished product would be. This is all because he had a vision and goals for the future of the company, which better allowed him to make decisions in pursuit of that vision in the present. His vision for the future of Disney is what allowed him to make a lot of questionable decisions that turned out to be brilliant. Having milestones and goals as a leader are what informs your decision-making process in the present. The last reason for Bob Iger's success has to do with his approach as a boss to the attitude he carried and how that inspired the people around him. Iger's take on optimism as a business leader is that people don't want to follow a pessimist. Pessimism does not create energy or inspire other people to do their best work. Optimism can inspire people. A leader can be a realist, but it's incredibly important to infuse some level of optimism into just about everything. This mindset was incredibly important to the man who was leading the happiest place on earth. Being an effective leader to Iger didn't mean being ignorantly optimistic to his surroundings and the challenges facing the business, but instead knowing the challenge ahead and seeing through the storm to what could or would be achieved after they go through that difficult period. This kind of mindset is endemic to effective leaders because they are tasked with inspiring the people around them. An inability to do this results in you and your company being in a drab situation where there is a lack of motivation to work because people feel like they are facing insurmountable odds. Iger hedged this feeling by approaching every situation as an optimist, knowing that with the team he had put together, any task was possible. I know it can be difficult to understand the effect Iger had on the company as a whole through looking at just his management style and ideals and not quantifying his work. Iger's success can only truly be underlined by looking at how he was able to grow the company under his leadership. Disney went from a market cap of $58 billion when he took the position to $250 billion when he retired, and now sits at over $280 billion thanks to his guidance going into his resignation. I think it's important that I quantify his impact on the company by touching on how Bob Iger influenced and changed all the large segments of Disney that were under him. The parks, the movies, the TV shows and channels, merchandise, and a new segment created under him, streaming. The biggest impact he had on pushing the park side of the business forward had to be the completion of his $5.5 billion pet project, Shanghai Disney Resort in China, that was opened in March of 2016. Iger demonstrated his sheer willpower to get this park open by taking 40 trips to Shanghai from 1998 when the park was conceptualized to 2016 when it opened, 11 of which happened from January to June of 2016. He had imagined the park back when he was the head of the parks division in 1998 and was able to see it through to fruition when it eventually opened in 2016. On the movies and TV segments of the business, his impact was quite significant. He made various acquisitions throughout his career, starting in 2006 with a $7.4 billion acquisition of Pixar to get their talent in studio, leading to the 2009 acquisition of Marvel for $4 billion to get a giant cast of characters that had limitless on-screen potential. Then the $4 billion acquisition of Lucasfilm to get some of the largest franchise brands like Star Wars and Indiana Jones. And finally, the $71.3 billion acquisition of 20th Century Fox that gave them an endless backlog of content and incredibly valuable IP. All of these acquisitions generated billions in profits and allowed Disney to break the mold of their more traditional Disney films without having to sacrifice their brand, which was a huge upside. Their box office dominance under Iger is also quite astounding. Disney controlled around 10% of the domestic box office market share in 2005 when Iger took over. By 2019, that market share had ballooned to over 33%, meaning 33% of every dollar spent in a movie theater was going towards seeing a Disney film, which greatly enhanced their merchandising opportunities. Merchandising and monetizing Disney IPs has always been a big part of Disney's business model. Whether it be those classic Mickey Mouse ears from the park or an Elsa plush doll, it all generates huge profits for the company. Under Iger, they had some of their most successful merchandising opportunities ever. The greatest of those would be Frozen, where they were able to top $5.2 billion in merchandise sales just 2 years after the release of the movie. To put that in perspective, the actual box office for Frozen was only $1.29 billion, which, by the way, was the highest grossing animated film of all time at that point. Frozen, at its peak, accounted for over 25% of Disney's merchandise sales and had over 700 Frozen-themed products being sold in Walmart at once. That was all just one animated film, and if we take a look at the highest-grossing animated films of all time to see if Disney had any opportunity to repeat the success, you'd find that they don't only hold 1, or 2, or 3, or 4, or 5, or 6, or 7, but 8 of the top 10 highest-grossing animated movies of all time. All over $1 billion box office revenue, and all released under Iger's tenure of CEO. Knowing that, you shouldn't be surprised to find out that in 2019, Disney did $55 billion in global retail sales of licensed Disney merchandise, more than double their closest competitor. So I'd say his leadership had a significant impact on our merchandising market as well. Of course, I must bring up Iger's swan song when it comes to the last things he did while at Disney. Disney Plus may be his greatest success for the company, as not only did it open them up to a new vertical that they had not been open to before, but in its first 14 months, it was able to beat their 4-year goal and reach nearly 100 million subscribers and $3.5 billion in revenue. For consideration, Netflix took over 10 years to hit 100 million subscribers and only sits around 209 million now, and just recently started turning a profit, something Disney was capable of doing at launch. At this growth rate, and thanks to a lot of the IP Iger was able to pick up along the way, Disney will surely become the largest streaming service in a couple of years. It was finished. The sun was setting on Iger's time at Disney. He was ready to move on. On February 25th of 2020, Bob Iger stepped down as CEO of Disney and replaced by Bob Chapek. He believed that with the launch of Disney Plus and the integration of Fox properties into Disney, it meant it was an optimal time for a new CEO to take over. As Iger prepared to ride off into the sunset, there was nothing that could stop him moving on from Disney altogether.
America's new normal.
We are dealing with a crisis that we have never seen in our lifetime.
Do not send your children to schools.
No one should be on the streets.
On April 20th, Bob Iger resumed operational duties as the executive chairman to help Disney weather COVID. It was too tough of a time at Disney for their greatest leader to leave them, so he stayed on to help them get through the transitional COVID period so that they would be better positioned to come out of the pandemic as a roaring success rather than a pitiful failure. His interjection was well received and served a crucial leadership role in ensuring Disney wouldn't fall apart under the challenging circumstances and harsh conditions for their business that the pandemic had brought forward. Iger's stint as the executive chairman is set to end at the end of 2021. He's looking forward to move on to other things, but his influence on Disney will be present for generations to come. As a leader, a visionary, and an inspiration. I'd like to leave you with a quote from Bob Iger that I believe sums up his performance and mindset as an executive very nicely. If we give people the ability to buy a lot more because they can store a lot more for a company that creates TV shows and movies, that's fantastic. If you've made it this far in the video, thanks for sticking around till the end. And another special thanks to Mike from Company Man for all his help throughout the creation of this video and channel. He'll be in the description for anyone who's been living under a rock. If you have any other thoughts, critiques, or ideas, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your feedback. Other than that, thanks for watching.